Welcome to the Ontario Art Podcast. Welcome to our first episode of the Cloud Gallery webcast and podcast. Thank you so much for being here, Julia. I'm so excited.
It is my pleasure, Virginia.
First question is, tell me about yourself as an artist. What do you do? What mediums do you use?
That's a lot of questions in one there, Virginia.
It is. The big one.
So I'm Julia Veenstra, and I live in Hamilton, Ontario, and I have developed my art career here in Hamilton. I've lived in 4 different countries, and about 14 years ago, we came back from Kenya. We'd lived in Tanzania and Kenya, and then we moved back when our kids were starting to go to university. And I started my career in a little studio, actually on my dining room table in Hamilton. And then I rented a studio and moved on to purchasing a building and having my own studio in the building. And so that's been about a 14-year career. I mostly do, at this point, Canadian landscape. Interestingly, when I lived in Africa, I was mostly figurative. So it was a real switch. Yeah, it was a real switch when I came back from Africa to the color of the Canadian landscape. So it was the color of Africa that got me in the clothes and the people. And then when we came back to Canada, I switched to the landscape. And so I'm mostly known for my Canadian landscape, and I paint in acrylic.
Oh, wonderful. That's what gives it that really lush brightness.
Yeah, I do paint very brightly, lots of color.
So what do you think of the Cloud Gallery's hybrid model, so that it is both on the webpage, but also a physical space as well?
Well, in today's, especially during COVID's society, if you didn't pivot online, it would be a little bit difficult to really fulfill for your clients and succeed. So I think it's a great model. I liked it right away. I use my online presence a lot in my career. So that is one of the first things that I look for in a gallery, is to see some of their online presence. There's been many galleries that I've been involved with that the COVID experience, they have not translated into online presence, and it's kind of showing in the sand. And so I think the hybrid model is today. I think it's staying around. I don't think it's going away when we can revisit. It's just an option that people are looking for.
Yes, I fully agree. Especially with everyone having home offices and being more at home. I think that the sales of art itself have definitely skyrocketed because people are actually spending time in their homes and they need to decorate, or they want something cool for their background.
Yeah, it's true.
I heard that you were the first one to sell a painting through the gallery.
Yeah, well, people are hungry, and even just walking by the window, I'm glad that painting fed somebody's soul, and that it related to them. And that's what art does. Art, it's a good business that they're opening, because people are really looking for beauty in their lives, especially this year.
Here's the big question. How did you get started in art?
Oh, that is a big question. So I was one of those kids that the teachers would identify in grade school, that, they would say to my mom, did you know she can draw? Did you know that? And my mom was an artist. So, and lots of people in our family were talented that way. So it didn't seem, I don't think, to her to be a big deal. So she was very aware that I could draw. And then I was one of those kids that went in high school. I took all the art courses because I loved it. And I won all the art awards. But then you go to college, and all the other kids that are there are also the ones that won all the awards. And it becomes a very different setting. So I enjoyed college. I definitely don't think that I was the most talented one in college. There were just so many naturals, and I learned a lot there. I did have back then, I still had the very vibrant paint color choices and
Yep.
things that I used. So that was more like adding tools to my tool belt. And then after college, I embarked on a very creative career of having 5 children, and I raised them. So those were wonderful creations. So while I was a stay-at-home mom, but while I raised them, I did art on the side. So I did everything. So I'm 55. So I take back, like, go back to shabby chic, go back to folk art,
yes.
go back to ducks on the wall in the kitchen, so all of those things I touched on, and I was able to do a great side business from home by doing commissions only. So I didn't ever do just paint in my studio. I didn't have time or space for a painting studio. So
Yep.
if I had a commission, if I had a sale, I did it at nighttime when the kids were asleep on my dining room table. But when we moved to Tanzania, we lived there for 4 years. I was homeschooling my kids while my husband did his job. And I did have time to set up a table, space, because the kids were getting older and homeschooling didn't take all day. And so I was able to start developing then. I did great in Tanzania with the expat community. And then we moved to Kenya, where we worked at an international school and I taught art.
Wow.
And yeah, so that was kind of neat. And then when we moved home, that was when the kids were all older, 3 in university, 2 in high school. They didn't need me anymore to be making lunches and delivering homework. So I started at the kitchen table, took a studio downtown, which was one of the best things I ever did, because I was part of a monthly art crawl, and it was very popular and people came through, and I was discovered there by a few galleries and things like that. But I was also challenged by the other artists in the building, and it just grew from there. And I grew into right now, I think I have about 8 galleries across the country. I've had about 12, but you have to start limiting it at some point where you pull back. But I bought a building and I had a studio there for almost 10 years. And during COVID last year, it was kind of like, oh, I think I'll stay home for a couple of weeks when we closed the doors initially.
Yeah.
And I ended up really enjoying not having to leave the house and drive 20 minutes to my studio. So we decided to push up a dream that I had. I live in Hamilton by the lake, and we have a lovely property, and there was always there's a shed on the property, and it was my dream to create that to be a studio so that I could just pad out with my coffee in the morning and do my thing. And it's nice to say that I've been in this space now for about 2 weeks, painting daily. And so I shut down my studio on James Street, and I've moved home, and I think it's going to be a wonderful adventure.
That's amazing. That's an awesome story. I love that.
Yeah, I've got grandkids now, so it's going to be nice that they can pop in the summer, and I could just wash my paintbrush. It's no longer, hey mom, when are you going to be home? Okay, drive 30 minutes. I'm going to be available. So
you were talking about getting to work in your studio. What is your creative process like? Like, what is your routine for starting a piece?
So that's really kind of interesting, because I'm either working on commissions or I'm working on specific thematic bodies of work for different galleries. But it always starts with coming into the studio, putting on my apron. I have my coffee. I get my radio on. Like, there's just a bit of a routine that I have to do.
Yeah.
And then I start thinking. So if I'm not working on something presently, I have drawers full of reference material, and I will sit with my coffee and I will just go until I'm inspired. And if something hits me, that's what I go with. And I find the more I paint, and you probably do too as a creative person, the more you do, the more you think of. So really, I'm never really stuck for what is coming next, because I've just done something and it's caused a great desire to explore something I learned in that painting again and again and again. So that's really fun with the process.
I love that you've sort of managed to catch that creative genius and like hold on to that muse for that amount of time and be able to just push that out into the world. I love it.
Yeah, and I am a 9 to 5er. So I don't work late at night. I tend to paint 5 to 6, 7 hours a day, and that's it. I can't really do more than that, but and I don't really like working in the evenings or weekends, and I give myself weekends off. I treat it like a job.
That's wonderful. That's a really good idea. I think that giving yourself that routine probably makes it easier for you to build and to work on your piece.
It does. When I take a weekend off, I really actually look forward to Monday morning.
This was one of my sort of fun questions that I really like, because you paint with so many vibrant colors. What is your favorite color or colors?
Well, I have very many favorite colors, but I am a turquoise girl. But I also, if you look at the paintings behind me, you'll see a lot of the quinacridone colors.
Yes.
So there's a quinacridone burnt orange and a nickel gold and an Indian yellow, and you'll see the turquoises and purples. I don't think, Virginia, I can pick one. So it's definitely a palette.
That's perfectly acceptable. That's very acceptable because of all of the beautiful colors that you work with. When I was I was trying to really decide, I'm like, what is my favorite color? I'm really thinking about it. And I was like, oh, you know what? I think my color might actually just be gray, because it's a blank slate for all of the color to go on. And like, it can come in warmths and cools. And it really sets a room off in a different way, depending on the warmth or the cool. So I think mine's probably gray, but then again, I'm obsessed with chartreuse and the turquoises and the aquas, and I have color all over.
I find I use a neutral gray 5 by Golden, and I find when I touch that to some of the other colors, it just gives me the mute that I need.
Yes.
And that even on its own is just a gorgeous color, but that especially touched with purple is to die for.
Ooh, I sort of had like a tingly, melty feeling there. I was like,
to die for.
Yes. Are you experimenting with anything right now?
Well, I'm always growing. So there's always something that will happen in a painting that I'm like, oh, I haven't experienced that before. I'm trying to go a little bit more abstract in some of my shapes.
Okay.
And not be so attached to the traditional form of something. So I am experimenting, I think, with a little bit more abstract, but my paintings are still representational, but in them, I think you would say there are abstract qualities.
Do you have a time where a painting just went so wrong?
Yes, and I have a video on my Instagram IGTV where I cut it up.
Oh,
it went wrong. And then I had it for 4 years. No one bought this painting.
Yeah.
And then I cut it up on I did a story of cutting it up. And oh my goodness, I got so much flack for that. People like, oh, you should have donated it or you should have given it away. And I'm like, well, you don't donate something that doesn't work well.
Yeah.
Number one, that's not really kind. And not really, you're supposed to be putting out your best. So it was just cathartic to cut it up.
Yeah, and you know what? That catharsism is something that we need in our lives. That was probably a very satisfying moment for you.
Yeah, it was great.
I love that you posted on your Instagram. I'm going to have to check it out. All right, so we've got another question here coming up about your connection to nature and place.
That's an interesting one. So we don't own a cottage or anything like that, but whenever we are in cottage country, my favorite thing to do is to be on the water. And when I'm on the water, it's just glorious. And I take a million photos from the boat. And I would say my favorite place to be is on the water. But on a hike, when it's a sunny day and there's lots of shadows and shapes, those are also my favorite places to be. And my garden. I am an avid gardener and I love flower gardening. And every day I am walking around my property, seeing what's coming up. So I think if I was attached to a place, it would be my garden.
Oh, that's wonderful. What kind of flowers do you grow?
Oh my goodness, I've got everything in here it's mostly a perennial bed. I do add a few annuals, but it's mostly perennial, and where things are ebbing and flowing and coming and going. So
yeah. Ooh, here's a tough one, because you talked about being on the water as where you get that connection to nature and place, and of course your garden. Do you have like a specific place in Ontario, like maybe like Grey Bruce or Simcoe Muskoka, where like you get on the water and you see the trees and you're just like, yes?
Yes, that would be Muskoka.
Muskoka.
Like I said, we never owned a cottage, but that's where we went. So there's a place, it's a place of comfort, and it's a place of family when you go with your kids and you're just there. And now we're starting to rent places and going with our grandkids, and it's just a time to be away. So being in Muskoka it's more than just the shapes of the trees and the nature, it's what it evokes, right?
Yes.
I have a friend who paints a lot of swimmers and summer scenes, and her mission statement is, or her sentence is basically that she paints the myth of summer. So her paintings evoke in someone just this feeling of the cottage. And we all kind of just went to the cottage for a week, right? But that's all we remember about childhood is the cottage. So even if out of the 12 weeks of summer, we only went for 1 or 2 weeks, that's what we remember. And that's what the Muskokas does for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
I also find it quite beautiful up there. I will take, I just like to take drives, and I will just decide on an area. I really like to go up to Bala and just sort of, it's very small, but it's got these amazing buildings and strange areas that the shapes, I'm just obsessed with them. So I go
I know.
Yep.
I know.
Has your art practice changed this year due to COVID? I know you mentioned that you closed down your studio on James Street.
So I closed down my studio on James Street. We have built a new studio. In the meantime, I worked everywhere from the dining room to the living room to the garage, and then back to a spare room. Now I'm quite happy because everything is here in one place, and I have a sink and I have my supplies, and so that changed. I had to pivot, just like the Cloud Gallery is doing online. We had to really pull a lot of things. I have a show that I run yearly, and it had to go online, and it was my most successful show ever.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And yeah, so online did not deter people, and it was fantastic. So I've had to do a lot of pivoting, making sure the website is up to date and ready for people who want to shop. And then we had to do curbside pickup, and how to show art with masks on, and all of that. Yeah,
that sounds like it's been difficult, but definitely worth it.
It's been worth it. I'm really looking forward to whenever I get my vaccine and we can move forward.
So we spoke about your artwork, where you find your inspiration, and your amazing new studio space today. Thank you so much for joining me on the Cloud Gallery. I really appreciate your time, and I learned so much about you, and I will definitely be checking out that video on Instagram.
That's fun. Thank you very much.